Good afternoon, everyone. I am Bosun Amofaye. Welcome to Business Incorporated. We welcome our viewers in Nigeria and around the world. Let's get the program started. Coming up today, all eyes are on the European Central Bank later today as it announces its rate decisions and possible stimulus measures that will be coming from Mario Draghi. And Federal Reserve Chairman Janet Yellen says she was looking forward to a U.S. interest rate hike that will be seen as a testament to the economy's recovery from recession. Plus, ahead of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation in South Africa later this week, economic analysts advocate the need for Nigeria to review its one-sided trade agreement with China. Now, these are the details of those stories and more. The European Central Bank is expected to announce further stimulus measures to boost growth in the Eurozone's economy later today. At its policy meeting, the ECB has the option of stepping up its quantitative easing or assets buying program with newly created money. The ECB could also cut the interest rate on overnight bank deposits at its facility. This is to encourage lending, as with a rate of 0.2% negative, the banks in effect pay the ECB for holding their reserves. The policy is designed to make it more profitable for commercial banks to offer loans to consumers and businesses within the region, ensuring a free flow of money. And quite a lot to chew today, as all eyes are down now to the final hours of the ECB's rate decision. Let's cross over to Frankfurt Stock Exchange, where DW's financial correspondent for Channels Television, Conrad Bossen, is standing by to talk to us about what's been called the Draghi Day in Europe. Good afternoon, Conrad. Let's get the conversation started. The European Central Bank about to make this announcement in terms of monetary policy. What are the expectations?
Bosun, let me first start with the expectations about the Federal Reserve's monetary policy. This has very much to do with statements that the Federal Reserve Chairman Janet Yellen made yesterday in Washington. Yellen said that she thinks the economy was on the road to recovery in the United States, and that she was looking forward to the day when interest rates in the US were rising. Now, this was taken as a clear sign from the Federal Reserve Chairwoman that markets have to get prepared for an interest rate hike as early as December, so in a couple of days, and this immediately had an effect on the financial markets. The dollar made a jump upwards, the euro-dollar exchange rate slumped downwards, and several stock markets in Asia reacted negatively. Now, here in Europe, the situation is completely different. It's expected that the European Central Bank makes its monetary policy even more generous, which means not probably that the overall interest rate will be lowered. It already is at a super low 0.05%, but the deposit rate, which is the charge that the European Central Bank charges banks when they deposit money at the European Central Bank, this is already at minus 0.2% in negative territory, and it's expected that it's going to be lowered further, which means that the ECB is probably taking an even higher charge from banks if they park money at the European Central Bank. The idea behind it is that the banks should rather take the money and give it out as loans to businesses in countries of the Eurozone.
Thank you, Conrad. However, look at Eurozone. This morning we got France unemployment data a bit negative. Consumer price inflation is very low within that your region, 0.1%. This is despite the ECB monetary policy, which already been very generous for a long time. So why should more monetary easing? Why would it work now? At what is the level of inflation, consumer price inflation, if we put it that way, are expected within the Eurozone to jumpstart things at a rate at which all the economies in Europe will benefit?
You're perfectly right, Bosun. There's a lot of criticism against the European Central Bank because of its monetary policy, mostly because one important factor concerning consumer price inflation cannot be influenced by the European Central Bank at all. And I'm talking about the oil price. As you know, in Nigeria, oil is very cheap at the moment on the world markets, and the price finding for oil is really not something that a European Central Bank or any other central bank in the world could directly influence with its monetary policy. And as this is the case, the criticism is, well, why be very generous in monetary policy terms in the first place if you cannot influence the oil price, thus not influence the consumer price inflation. But it's important to keep the reasoning in mind how the European Central Bank wants to influence consumer price inflation. It is with the deposit rate I talked about. If really lending will improve in the Eurozone, and it has started to improve in recent months, then eventually companies would, of course, start spending again, consumers would start spending again, and this is something likely to push consumer price inflation further upwards. This is the reasoning behind it, and that's what, well, people who are in favor of the European Central Bank's policy are mentioning when they argue in favor of that monetary policy.
Conrad, currencies are at the heart of this conversation as well. Whatever Mario Draghi decides to announce in a couple of hours from now, Europe needs some kind of, some certain level of euro to be able to be competitive in terms of exports to Africa. For example, Germany, you export BMW, luxury cars and goods to Africa, to other parts of the world, so you need to stay competitive. You need to get your economy back on track. So how will this interest rate announcement, QE stimulus, affect the relationship between the euro and the dollar, considering expectations of what Janet Yellen, the rest of our team will do December 15 and 16?
Well, it is expected that the downward trend for the euro will continue because as we have an American monetary policy which is becoming tighter, this is likely to favor the dollar. It is going to be more interesting for international investors to invest in US dollar denominated assets, while at the same time with our more generous and more inflation focusing monetary policy here in the Eurozone, it's likely that the euro is going to devalue more. This is an effect that is not officially a target of the European Central Bank, but not officially, of course, it is, because, as I said, it helps our exporting companies. It might become a problem eventually when other places in the world start the same. I'm talking about China, I'm talking about Japan. And also, of course, it might eventually become a problem for countries here, for companies here in the Eurozone. Because while our exporters find it more easy to be competitive outside the Eurozone due to the cheap euro, import prices are rising. Things that you buy from outside the Eurozone are becoming more expensive. And that is not a problem only as long as commodity prices remain as low as there are. Oil prices, coffee prices, copper prices, you name it. But these prices eventually, of course, are going to pick up. And then the cheap euro is also going to become a problem for companies here, for consumers in the Eurozone, and then it's sure that this is going to be discussed and the monetary policy of the ECB is going to be seen more critical then.
Okay. Conrad, I think it's time to go grab some lunch and get ready and wait for Draghi's statement. Okay. Have a great day. Conrad Bossen.
Absolutely.
DWTV for Channels Television, finance correspondent, sitting there at Frankfurt Stock Exchange. When we come back after the break, South Africa is the host of the China-Africa Summit. Jacob Zuma, the president, is already putting pen to paper with the Chinese leader. Nigeria's president is heading in the same direction. He is also having his pen in his pocket to sign billions of dollar deal with the Chinese. Everybody is hanging around the Chinese president, Xi Jinping. How much money is there to share, and what will this money be used for? We'll talk about that next.